Hey, Pushnet, new little video. This one, sorry about the delay. Um, I'm in the middle of a move, so it's been taking a lot of my time. But more out that in the future, I should start being more regular videos soon. But this one, I wanted to give my input on the coronavirus. I saw a lot of videos on many channels that are less than desirable in what the medical part of the coronavirus. So I wanted to give a little video on that and much more. So let's start about that. Okay, so recently I've just joined the biocontainment unit here in British Columbia. So for those that don't quite know what a BC containment is, a biocontainment unit is basically if there would be anything like Ebola patient, it's a special unit that we would be providing the care. So I'm kind of new to this, but part of our orientation and training, we've been watching videos, and I'll put some link down. Awesome little websites, and this is part of this, and I thought it was very appropriate for what we've been talking about. Um, so obviously, I wanted to, like I said in the intro, I wanted to talk about the coronavirus, but also a greater talk on a lot of the PPEs and videos that people are doing out there. There's a little kind of not misinformation, but misunderstanding, I think, of how to prevent getting sick and some of the disease. So first of all, coronavirus is going wild now, and there's a lot of hypes about it. First, let's be clear. Right now, as it is, and that could be changing, there's a very low chance of being sick here in North America. Why? Well, first of all, the reservoir are not that big, and people that are coming were very well contained. Second, we a lot of emergencies and ports of entries. I've been screening all those people, so therefore most case have been, like I said, contained, and so that decrease the number of susceptible hosts and reservoir people that we're going to see. So that's for the coronavirus. The second thing, there's a lot of videos out there all about, and even on Amazon, apparently masks are getting sold by the box, and they're so expensive, and they're jacking up their price, and everybody's buying all their masks and everything. And well, kind of good because I guess it brought some information, but masks won't do much. And what I wanted to do is kind of give you a better understanding of why I mean that mask on his own is not the greatest tool, despite that everybody in a lot of the videos I've been seeing, that's all they talk about. So as part of the new job that I got for the containment unit, we have to do some training. And this is a little, and I'll put the link down of the full video, which was very great actually. It's just 17 minutes. And they talk about the chain of infection. And this is where a lot of the videos out there, they only talks about the gear to have, but not so much the knowledge behind it. And to me, in my head, would be like comparing like videos saying get a gun, but nobody's going for learning how to use the gun. And so it's the same thing. If they tell you buy PPEs, buy masks, put gowns and stuff, but how to use the gowns and how to use the mask is as important, if not more, than just having the gear at your home. And this is where people can have cross-contamination for it. So I wanted to go a little bit about how you can get sick. So as you can see here on the screen, there's what we call the chain of infection. So there's many links, and if you stop any of those links from happening, you cannot get sick. Again, any link in that chain and you not getting sick. So it's important about that, and this is why things like Ebola in the past, or this time the coronavirus, is low risk as it is right now. That could change, and but information like this will be able to update you as you're getting more information, because it'll give you the tool to understand what to do instead of just reacting. You'll be able to prevent and also be able to implement some protocols in your own preps, or even understand a little bit better how it works. So first of all, as you see at the beginning of the top, which is the top here, it's the organism itself. So like, for example, right now on our skin, we have tons of organisms, bacteria, virus, and a lot of them are inert, or they're not harmful to us because they're outside. They're on our clothes, they are on our skin, but they're not inside. Or even sometimes we have organisms inside of us, but they're helpful. For example, E. coli, we have all E. coli in our stomach, and there it's good when it's there. If it comes into our blood, that's different, but when it's inside our guts, that's a good thing. The second one is the reservoir, and this is where it becomes a little bit more important. And this is where I want to spend a little bit more time. So first of all, what we call a reservoir, it's somebody that carries this organism. So right now, for example, for the coronavirus, in China, the place where the pandemic or epidemic started was where the reservoir was. And so the people that was living in there could carry the organism outside the city, and then they become reservoir on their own. So there's the people, but there's also another way that reservoir can happen. So imagine that you would be in a theater or a rooms, and it could be any place, market, things like that. If you have somebody that is sick in there, that place, if they, for example, if it's a droplet precaution, they can sneeze all over the place, and that place itself can become another reservoir because, for example, influenza, flu, coronavirus, they can live on surface a very long period of time. So up to like some place like 72 hours, even longer, depending on the surface and things. And so those places become reservoir themselves, because if I touch this and then I bring it in and it comes on me, then I become a reservoir myself, so the reservoir can move. And it's important to understand about the reservoir concept, because let's say you have someone that is inside a room and you go in there, then you're susceptible to get this organism. But if you don't go in there, the chain is broken. If you're not in contact, so an example of this is that if the person was in the plane or you're in the airport, you're not in contact with that person. That person is in the plane, you're in the airport, you're near that person, that position, but you're not in contact with the reservoir. The reservoir is the plane, not the airport. Once they get out of the airport, the plane, and they start walking towards the airport, then yes, everything that they touch, everywhere that they go, if they sneeze in another place, those places now can become reservoir. So this is where a lot of people, when they talk about the mask, this is where it is a little bit important, because they start carrying masks when they walk on the streets. A lot of those diseases, especially like the coronavirus, are transmitted, and we'll talk about most of transmission by droplets. So that means that when I sneeze, those little particles gets into kind of a mist, and that mist by gravity will go down because they have a certain weight, and then they'll can get down. But if I don't get in contact right at that second that those things are in the air, or they don't go on me, it will go down on the ground. And so if I'm not in the vicinity of that person when the sneeze happened or the droplets are propagate, I cannot get sick. And so if I'm outside and there's a big wind going in, those droplets will be brought somewhere else. And so if I'm just staying in an open air um, region, then and there's a good circulation, there's low risk of getting a reservoir. And so that's why when people walk on the street with those masks and everything, it's kind of a little bit useless because you don't need those masks. The next part of the chain of infection is portal of exit. And so this depends on the virus. And well, the virus, the organism. And so if it's distributed by diarrhea, for example, E. coli, then that means, or by stool, that means the organism is in the stool. So if I get in contact with urine, I don't get the organism. If I get in contact with stool, I get in contact with the organism. If it's a sneeze, for example, the coronavirus in this case, then I can get in contact with the virus because it's in the air through the portal of exit, which is upper airway. Respiratory syndrome, so that you can get it. But if, for example, if I get in contact with the urine of somebody with coronavirus, there's no distribution that way because the virus is in the lungs, not in the urine or the feces. So the portal of exit is important as well to understand of how is the disease distributed or the organism is distributed. Which brings the mode of transmission. So there's 3 modes of transmission. We did videos in the past, but I want to review a little bit because some people keep confusing. This is where a lot of the scare, especially when it was the Ebola, kind of came with. Because modes of transmission determine what kind of PPE, what we call personal protective equipment, you will wear. So if it's contact, that means that the pathogen can only be transmitted by direct contact. So that means you touch me, I get the contact. It doesn't really stay in the air, it's not transmitted by the air, it's direct contact. So either I get in contact with a surface that has a pathogen on, or that I get contact with the reservoir, the person himself that has the pathogen, and that's contact. So that's pretty easy. If I have a barrier between me and whatever I'm touching, then there's no transmission of the pathogen. Droplets, which is mostly the coronavirus, and this is the one that we're mostly concerned in most disease, is little particles where sometime people talk about, for example, there was a case where Ebola could say airborne, and people say, no, it's becoming airborne. Is that sometimes droplets can become airborne when, and that's very important, when we do certain procedure. So imagine that you have a balloon that you throw in the air. Because it's light, it will float a little bit and stay up, and as soon as there's wind and stuff, it stays in there. That's airborne. That means that as long as I breathe, the pathogen itself is in the air. So if I can be behind the person, and because I'm sharing the same air, I'm sharing the pathogen. So I can get sick if it's airborne. Droplets is different. That means that the particles are more like ping pong balls. So if I throw them, because they have a weight to them, they'll go down by gravity, they'll go down on the surface, they'll go down on the floor, but they want to go down. But just like if I have a paintball and I would put bursts of air, I can sustain that ball and it can stay in suspension in the air despite that it has a certain weight. And this is where certain procedure that we do in the healthcare, so when we do nebulizing medication, if we intubate someone, then the process becomes airborne. But that doesn't mean that the pathogen is airborne. It's just that the procedure that we're doing makes it airborne or at risk of being airborne because we're throwing air and we're suspending those particles up in the air. It's important because a lot of people, for example, when there was the Ebola, they were scared, oh, it's airborne, everybody's going to get sick and everything and stuff. It wasn't airborne, it was a droplet becoming airborne because of procedure that we were doing. Which makes also, for PPE, a lot of people, they want to dress like us healthcare professional. You have to understand something. When we're a healthcare professional, I am in direct contact, in very close contact, in a close environment to a person that is a pure reservoir of throwing those things. That's why they're in the hospital. They're sick. They're a reservoir. They have their organism. They're throwing those droplets all over the place. The room is closed. There's not good circulation. Even if they're in a negative pressure room, there's some circulation, but there's still all those surface in there. This is why we have to wear all those gear, because we're going inside. But if I would be walking on the street, or if I would be in a environment that is not that close, there's a good aeration, I don't need all those procedures. The other thing too to understand, especially for mode of transmission, and this is where a lot of people, they all talk about those masks to prevent that. Every time that I go into the room where I'm going to put those masks on, and surgical mask or the N95 mask. First, the N95 mask, I have to be, so right now, like even with the little beard that I have, it could pass, but I have to be fitted every year, and I have to be shaving more than less than 48 hours so that my mask fit properly. And every time I go into the room, I have to put a mask and change the mask. A lot of people, they talk about having N95 or surgical masks. Surgical masks are good for 10 minutes max because of the humidity that you throw in there. It gets wet. So actually, if you really want to wear a mask, cotton masks would probably be better because you would be able to clean them and you would be able to reuse them. And this is what brings to another issue with the PPE, is that a lot of people are like, oh, put a mask on, put a mask on, put a mask on. Okay, so I would put the mask on. So now I go outside and I feel safe and I got this mask on and everything. First of all, they rarely talk about having gloves. So if I don't have gloves on and I touch a surface, or even if I clean my hands, the pathogen can be on my hands. Then after that, they wear that mask. First, it has to be fit properly. So a lot of people, they pinch it instead of bring it down nicely. And if you pinch it, that means you can have air kind of going through. And so there's another entry of that you can get the droplets coming in instead of protecting you. Two, the mask can lose its ability to create a barrier because of the humidity of my mouth, can break it down. Three, when I remove the mask, so we're going to talk about donning and doffing. Donning is when I put the PPE in, and doffing is when I take off the PPE. There's a lot of studies out there that have shown that people, and we're talking about healthcare professional, people that get trained on this, people that do it on a constant basis, they get infected with disease when they doff out. So putting in, it's nice, you're outside, it's safe, everything is good, I'm putting my mask, I'm putting my gloves, all of that, putting my little hat. But when I take it off, let's say I go and I take my mask this way, my hand is contaminated because the whole mask is contaminated. So when you take off your mask, you're supposed to take it this way and be careful that you don't propagate all the particles that are on the mask, because the mask is now a reservoir. And this is why the importance of understanding reservoir, in a lot of videos I see don't talk about the reservoir, because the mask is now a reservoir. I was in contact with somebody that was a reservoir. let's say he sneezed, or I was in the environment. Now the mask is my reservoir. If I touch the mask with my hands, I'm now contaminated. Even if I wear the mask and the mask protected me while I was in contact with the person, the mask is now a new reservoir. If I don't handle the mask properly, I can get recontaminated by touching the mask improperly. So that's why doffing is important. Another thing that a lot of the videos don't talk about, your shoes. So if I go into a room, or if I go into a place where people were sneezing up there, where did I say the particles goes? On the floor. If I walk with there my shoes, and then I undo my shoes at the end of the night, and I don't have the proper shoes that can be clean or that can be absorbed. Obviously, some surface transport better than others, so like hard surface for like virus and things like that. But shoes are as important to decontaminate as well. They can become reservoir as well. So for example, in the Ebola protocol, when we get out of the room, we have to shovel in a bucket for 1 minute to kill any chance that we would have been able to walk or step by a mistake into the Ebola particles. So we have to clean our boots. So boots are also important when you decontaminate, when you doff out. So donning and doffing is as important, if not more, than any of the gear that you're going to wear, because the gear that you have will be as good as when you use it properly. Like, again, my reference that I was talking about, having a gun and learning how to use the gun, having the proper PPE, but learning how to use the PPE properly, putting in and putting it out. Another thing that a lot of people don't mention in their videos is they'll have, let's say, gloves and mask, or if they put them something over, so a gown. If my skin, so if I, let's say, I put my hands like this and my skin becomes, there's a gap between my glove and my skin, that's a contamination, because now my gloves was not able to protect, and there was a part, and so my hands can become contaminated, and so now it becomes a reservoir. That's why the concept of reservoir, which I found sad in a lot of videos, is not explained, and it's so important because wallet can become a reservoir, shoes can become a reservoir, anything that a person or the organism can survive on, plastics or hard surface, depending again of the organism, is a risk of contamination and become a reservoir. So if I take this part and I bring it somewhere else, so for example, my glasses, let's say somebody, I wanted to get protecting eyes and sneeze into my glasses, I'm protected because it went just into my glasses, but now my glasses are the reservoir. If I don't decontaminate my glasses, or if I take them and instead of taking them properly, so that would be like doffing like this, but if I take them this way, I've just contaminated my hand. I go and I scratch myself, boom, the organism just went, which is the port of entry. So the portal of entry is that, depending on the organism, will go different ways. So sometimes it's the mouth, sometimes it's the mucus, and so a lot of time in the videos, especially the coronavirus, eyes is part of the port of entry that it can go in. It's not just the nose. So people wear like those beautiful masks and everything and stuff, but they have nothing to protect their eyes. They don't have any vision. If I have glasses, they feel they're protected, but they're not. There's space in between there, and even the glasses themselves, if they're splashed by the droplets, if I go and I clean them and I clean them like this, I just contaminate it. It's a reservoir. But if I take them, for example, like this, and then I decontaminate it, I just kill the reservoir. I broke the chain of infection, then I'm a little bit much safer. But that's why doffing is so important. understanding the portal of entry is also important. But one of the concepts, if you can really see what I'm talking about, is the reservoir. Reservoir is so important, and you have to understand what is susceptible to be a reservoir. If you cut that, you cut a lot of the risk of you. So, for example, during the coronavirus, if there's a pandemic, if you stay away from markets or public place or anything that could have suspicious of being in contact with people that are a reservoir, then you don't have the infection. And then the last thing of the chain of infection, susceptible hosts. And so that means that a person that, for whatever the reason, get in contact with the organism that went to a reservoir, it used the right portal of entry, the transmission happened, it went into them, so basically the portal of exit was good. So let's say I sneeze, and then the person was in front of me, and so that means you breathe the air in, so the droplets, or it gets into contact with my hands, and then I go like this, and so now it's in me, so then I suddenly have the infection. So any place in that chain of infection, if you cut one of the link, you cut your chance of having infection. Sadly, a lot of the videos out there are all about those masks, which are kind of useless if you use it in an environment outside, because a box of 100, I think most of those boxes are for the mask, every 10 minutes. Think about that. If you have if you're going to go outside for 2 hours, every 10 minutes, so that means every hour you would have to have 6 masks on. So by 2 hours, you're already 12 masks into your box. Versus cotton would protect some of it, and it's more like a reminder. It's to remind you, like, not to touch your mouth, not to go inside. But it's very important that at the end of the day, if you have a cotton or N95 or any of the masks or any of the PPE that you want to buy or that you want to protect yourself, is to take it properly and use it the proper protocols, because now those PPE are considered reservoir themselves. So even if let's say you have to take care of one of your family member, you go into the room, they're the reservoir, you make all the protection, you have all the proper PPE on, you're all good and everything. Once you get out of that room, you're not safe. Now you are a reservoir. Your PPE is full of reservoir. If you take off that PPE properly, then you would be safe. Because now your PPE is the reservoir, but the PPE is your whatever. If you did your job properly, it stays with your PPE, not with you. So anyway, I wanted to do a video. If you got any question, just write it down. I'll try to answer as best as I can. I'm no expert, but obviously I have a little bit more knowledge than regular folks, and I'll try to answer as much as possible, and I'll talk to you soon.